Hello hockey fans, and welcome to part 2 of our investigation into the NHL cover athlete curse. Based on your overall response from last episode, a lot of you wanted me to continue down this journey and explore the rest of the games in EA Sports' hockey franchise. So here we are to do exactly that, folks. Let's pick up right where we left off at the end of part 1, and move on to the next 10 NHL titles that were released throughout the 2000s and early 2010s, which are known to a lot of fans as the heyday of the series, and feature some of the best titles that the company has ever made to date. If you have somehow stumbled upon this video while browsing your YouTube recommendations, and you haven't watched the first part in the miniseries, I highly recommend you go and watch that first, as I explain exactly what I'm doing here in great detail. But if you can't be bothered to do so, or you've completely forgotten how this works since last week, essentially, I am taking a look at every single athlete that EA Sports has featured on the cover of their NHL video game series, and I am putting the season when they were on the cover side by side with their production the year prior, in order to see if their time on the cover was cursed, improved, or showed little difference compared to the performance that earned them the honour in the first place. So last episode, we discovered that during the series' first decade of existence, a cover athlete was twice as likely to play better while they were on the box art than suffer some kind of curse, as 8 of the 15 players on the box art produced a noticeably improved year compared to the season prior. But what about the next decade in the series? Will this winning streak continue, or will the curse reign supreme? Well, in today's video, let's find out as we begin part 2, the Golden Years. Let's start with the 11th game in the series, which is of course NHL 2002. This title was the first to be released on both the Game Boy Advance and Microsoft's original Xbox console, and the cover featured one of the greatest players to have ever played the game in Pittsburgh Penguins forward Mario Lemieux. The year before he was featured on the game during the 2001 season, Mario Lemieux began the year away from the NHL, having retired from the league back in 1997. That is, until December 27th, 2000, when Lemieux revealed that he would be rejoining the NHL after a 3-year hiatus because his 4-year-old son Austin wanted to see his dad play hockey. Upon making his triumphant return to the league, the 35-year-old quickly shook off the rust and returned to his prior outstanding form, as he scored 35 goals and 76 points in just 43 games, earned a place at the 2001 All-Star Game, and was named to the second All-Star team as one of the best players in the league that season. Yep, Super Mario still had it, folks. And what about the year he was on the cover? Well, during the following 01-02 NHL season, Lemieux would still score at over a point per game pace by potting 6 goals and 31 points, but he would only suit up in 24 regular season games thanks to 2 different factors. The first being that he wanted to play in the 2002 Winter Olympic Games, so he kept himself out of the lineup for certain periods of time in order to stay healthy and help Team Canada go on to win the gold medal, which they would. The second reason was because Lemieux suffered a nagging hip injury for much of the season, which eventually sidelined him for the latter half of the year. Oh, but he still made an appearance at the All-Star Game, so the season wasn't a complete disaster, right? That said, the fact that Lemieux played almost half the games than the season prior, scored less than half the number of points, and struggled with the injury bug for much of the year, the first cover athlete of this decade is also the first to be hit with a curse. Sorry Lemieux, but it has to be done. Next up in our investigation, we have NHL 2003. This is the first game of the series to be released on the Nintendo GameCube, and features Calgary Flames forward Jarome Iginla on the cover. During the prior 01-02 NHL season, Iginla produced one of, if not the best season of his entire NHL career, as he notched a career-high 52 goals and 96 points in 82 games. Not only that, the Canadian forward was also named a first-team All-Star and won several individual awards, including the Rocket Richard Trophy as the league's leading goal scorer, the Art Ross Trophy as the league's highest point scorer, and the Lester B. Pearson Award as the league's MVP as voted for by the players. I think he was the right player for the cover at the time, don't you? However, this impressive performance would be difficult to replicate during his time on the cover, as in the 02-03 season, Iginla would score 35 goals and 67 points in 75 games. Not a bad season by any stretch, but compared to the year prior, he scored 29 less points in just 7 less games played and produced at under a point per game pace. If that wasn't disappointing enough though, he also didn't receive any All-Star nods or get his hands on any hardware. So I think it's fair to say that Iginla also suffered from the cover athlete curse. So just 2 games into this episode, we already have half the number of cursed athletes than the entirety of part 1. Things will get better though, right? Moving on to the third title of this decade now, as next we have NHL 2004. This game holds a very special place in my heart personally, as it was the driving force behind me discovering and then subsequently falling in love with the sport of hockey. In my opinion, it is still the best game in the series hands down, and I am more than happy to die on that hill if anybody wishes to challenge me here. However, the story behind the cover athlete is arguably even more fascinating than the game itself. Originally, it is said that Boston Bruins forward Joe Thornton was supposed to be on the cover, but he was removed from the role before the game was released, as he was charged with 2 counts of assaulting a police officer and 1 count of obstructing justice on May 17, 2003, although these charges were eventually withdrawn a few months later. EA Sports then decided to put Atlanta Thrashers forward Danny Heatley on the cover, and his likeness is featured on early copies of the game that were distributed before the season began, but he too was pulled off the cover after just a few weeks due to his role in causing a serious car accident on September 29, 2003, which tragically took the life of his teammate Dan Snyder. The company would then have to find another cover athlete, so they settled for Colorado Avalanche forward Joe Sakic. Thankfully though, third time was the charm in this instance, as Sakic would remain on the cover for the rest of the season, and there would be no more controversies or police involved. So given that there were 2 different players who ended up being featured on physical copies of the game, let's take a look at both of their performances and see how each of them did. Let's start with Danny Heatley. During the prior 02-03 NHL season, Heatley produced an impressive sophomore year in the league by scoring 41 goals and 89 points in just 77 games, while also being named to the 2003 All-Star game in the process. Unfortunately though, his aforementioned incident off the ice wouldn't do too much to help him on the ice either, as Heatley missed much of the year due to the injuries he suffered in the car accident, before returning to the lineup midway through the 03-04 season and scoring 13 goals and 25 points in 31 games. Sure, he still put up strong numbers, given that he had battled through some serious injuries, but his vastly inferior production compared to the year prior, coupled with the severity of his off-ice actions, means that the curse has just hit a 3-0 streak. And what about Joe Sakic? Well, in the prior 02-03 NHL season, Sakic would register a point-per-game performance thanks to potting 26 goals and 58 points in just 58 games. Not a bad effort considering he missed a large chunk of the season due to injuries. That said, the following 03-04 season would see Sakic's game return to its previous outstanding levels, as he scored 33 goals and 87 points in 81 games, earned himself a place at the 2004 All-Star game, and filled the centre position on the NHL's first All-Star team too. Now that's how you break a cover athlete curse, folks. Perhaps being a last-minute replacement was a good thing for him after all. We're making some good progress here now, folks, as next up we have NHL 2005. This title returns to having just a single cover athlete, and includes far less controversy surrounding it, as the box art features Vancouver Canucks forward Markus Naslund. During the 03-04 NHL season, Naslund continued to ply his trade as one of the Canucks' top goal scorers by notching 35 goals and 84 points in 78 games, which earned him a place at the 2004 All-Star game and the left-wing spot on the league's first All-Star team too. Now most of you watching this will already know that the following 04-05 NHL season never took place, as it was cancelled due to a year-long lockout. So rather than put Naslund's prior season up against his time overseas in the Swedish Elite League, for the sake of fairness and consistency, I shall be using his performance from the 05-06 NHL season as the comparative instead, as that is the next year in which Naslund got to suit up in the NHL. Yes, I'm aware that he was no longer on the cover once that season began, but I don't think it's fair on Naslund to compare a 13-game, 17-point year in Sweden during the lockout with an 84-point year in the best league in the world. Let's at least keep the playing field somewhat even here and only compare his NHL numbers. So during the following 05-06 NHL season, Naslund would continue to post similar scoring numbers to his prior year in the league, as he potted 32 goals and 79 points in 81 games, but he was unable to return to the All-Star game or book a place on the first or second All-Star team. That said, I think Naslund's cover year should be placed in the little difference category, as there wasn't a huge change in his performance from one year to the next. Sure, he may have scored 5 less points in 3 less games played, and went empty-handed in the accolade department, but considering he had missed an entire season of NHL hockey towards the tail end of his prime, and he had followed up his year-long hiatus with almost identical scoring numbers to the season prior, there isn't enough of a difference to sway me one way or the other. Maybe that's just me, but it's my list, so I get the final say, you know? Halfway through both the decade and the NHL video game series now, as next we have NHL 06. This is the first title in which EA Sports dropped to just the final 2 numbers of the year, and features Tampa Bay Lightning forward Vincent Lecavalier on the cover. Similarly to NHL 2005, we can't take any of Lecavalier's stats from the prior 04-05 season due to the lockout, so I'm going to use his 03-04 numbers instead. After all, I don't think a 30-game, 16-point year in the Russian Super League quite matches up in comparison, does it? So during the 03-04 NHL season, Lecavalier became the 5th player of this episode to record a 30-goal year before he was on the cover, as he notched 32 goals and 66 points in 81 games. Though this performance wouldn't earn him an All-Star nod or any individual awards, the Canadian forward would get his hands on something far greater, as his 16 points in 23 playoff games helped the Lightning to clinch the 2004 Stanley Cup. This feat made Lecavalier just the 2nd cover athlete in the series to have won the Stanley Cup the year before their time on the box art. So whilst EA Sports had consistently picked players on the rise, they weren't particularly known for choosing recent Cup champions. But how did he do once he was on the cover? Well, once the lockout had finally come to an end and the 05-06 NHL season got underway, Lecavalier would pick up right where he left off, as he scored 35 goals and 75 points in 80 games. Despite this near point-per-game production, the former first overall draft pick still wouldn't receive any awards or individual accolades. Now, part of me wants to put Lecavalier in the improved column since he scored 9 more points in 1 less game compared to the year prior, but considering I just put Naslund in the little difference category when his situation was flipped the other way around, I think it's only right to put Lecavalier right there with him. And besides, scoring 9 more points isn't exactly anything to write home about for a high-scoring forward, and though he may have been close to scoring at a point-per-game pace, he still wasn't quite there just yet. So there wasn't as big of a difference in his production as there could have been, especially when compared to the other improved players so far in this series. So in my mind, the little difference column is where you belong, Lecavalier. Next up, we have NHL 07. This was the first game in the series to be released on the Xbox 360 console, the only game to be available on the PlayStation Portable, and it features Washington Capitals forward Alexander Ovechkin on the cover. In the year before his cover appearance during the 05-06 season, Ovechkin made his long-awaited debut in the NHL after his original rookie year was cancelled due to the lockout, and he exploded onto the scene by scoring a whopping 52 goals and 106 points in 81 games. These outstanding numbers would also help Ovechkin win the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year, narrowly beating out fellow young phenom Sidney Crosby, as well as earn places on the All-Rookie team and the first All-Star team too. That extra season back home in Russia did wonders for his game, folks? When he was on the cover for the 06-07 season though, Ovechkin would continue to produce great numbers during his sophomore year in the league, albeit them slightly reduced compared to the year prior, as he potted 46 goals and 92 points in 80 games, earned a place at the 2007 All-Star game, and another appearance on the first All-Star team too. Other than scoring 14 less points in 1 more game played, the only major difference between these 2 years is the Calder Trophy win and his place on the All-Rookie team, which were technically impossible to repeat since he was no longer a rookie in the NHL. Given that he still put up fantastic numbers and earned several similar accolades at the end of the year, I think being on the cover neither helped nor hindered Ovi's performance that noticeably. Sure, his scoring numbers decreased by a sizable amount, but he still finished the year having scored at well over a point-per-game pace over a full NHL season. You can't call that a cursed year, folks. Moving on to the 17th title in the series now, as next we have NHL 08. This is the first game to be playable on Sony's PlayStation 3, and it features Carolina Hurricanes forward Eric Staal on the cover. During the prior 06-07 NHL season, Staal had a pretty decent year for himself by potting 30 goals and 70 points in 82 games, while also earning a place at the 2007 All-Star Game. Impressive, but nothing groundbreaking, right? However, while he was on the cover during the following 07-08 season, the former second overall draft pick would register one of the most productive seasons of his entire NHL career, as he notched 38 goals and 82 points in exactly 82 regular season games, and made another appearance at the All-Star Game too. So he earned exactly the same accolade as the year prior, but he scored 12 more points in the same number of games played. While the previous 3 entries on this list have all been put in the little change category with similar differences in their point totals, adding a dozen extra points compared to the year prior and reaching a point per game scoring pace is enough for me to say that Staal had an improved year while he was on the cover. And besides, the prior 3 players either remained at over a point a game pace, were close but not close enough, or dropped off that pace the year they were on the cover. So to reach that milestone after not doing so the year before is worthy of a place in the improved list to me. Welcome aboard, Staal. We're almost at the end of the golden years now, as next up we have NHL 09. This is the final game in the series to be available on PC, and is the first title to feature a defenseman on the cover in 9 years, as it stars Calgary Flames blue liner Dion Phaneuf. The year before he was on the cover in the 07-08 NHL season, Phaneuf recorded the most productive season of his entire NHL career, as he scored 17 goals and 60 points in 82 games, booked a trip to the 2008 All-Star Game, as well as a place on the first All-Star team in the process. Being named one of the best players in the league in just your 3rd season in the Bigs is impressive enough, but to do so as a 23-year-old D-man is pretty damn good if you ask me. However, the year he was on the cover during the 08-09 season, the Canadian defenseman would struggle to keep up with his career-high pace, as he scored 11 goals and 47 points in 80 games, while also missing out on any individual accolades. Still decent numbers for a blue liner to produce, but considering he scored 13 less points in just 2 less games played and didn't receive any All-Star places, Phaneuf becomes the first player since NHL 2004 to suffer from the cover athlete curse. Better luck next time, defenseman. Penultimately, in part 2 of our investigation, we have NHL 10. This title began the now decade-long tradition of releasing only on the latest PlayStation and Xbox consoles, and it features Chicago Blackhawks forward Patrick Kane on the cover. During the prior 08-09 NHL season, Kane would have a good year for himself by scoring 25 goals and 70 points in 80 games, while also earning a place at the 2009 All-Star Game. That said, the year he was on the cover in 09-10, the former first overall draft pick would produce one hell of a season. Not only would he record the most productive year of his career at the time by scoring 30 goals and 88 points in 82 games, while also earning a place on the first All-Star team too, his 28 points in 22 playoff games helped the Chicago Blackhawks end a 49-year drought by clinching the 2010 Stanley Cup. This historic feat made Kane the first and only player so far in the series to lift the Stanley Cup the year he was featured on the cover. If that's not an improved season, folks, I don't know what is. And finally, the 20th game in the NHL series and the final title of part 2 of our investigation, NHL 11. This game saw the introduction of the series' most popular and most polarizing game mode in Hockey Ultimate Team, and it's the first time in the series' history that EA Sports decided to use a cover athlete from the same team 2 years in a row, as it features Chicago Blackhawks forward Jonathantays. The year before his cover appearance during the 09-10 NHL season, Tays would continue to score at a similar pace to his prior 2 years in the league by potting 25 goals and 68 points in 76 games. However, not only would his 29 points in 22 playoff games help the Blackhawks lift the Stanley Cup, his performance during the postseason would also see him receive the Conn Smythe Trophy given to the playoff MVP. There's certainly worse ways to earn a place on the cover, isn't there? Once he was on the game's box art for the 10-11 season, the former 3rd overall draft pick would record the highest scoring season of his NHL career at the time, and his second most productive year to this very day, as he potted 32 goals and 76 points in 80 games, and booked his place at the 2011 All-Star Game too. So when he was on the cover, Tays scored 8 more points in 4 more games played, reached the 30-goal plateau for the first time in his career, and was named an All-Star as one of the best players in the league that season. Sure, his trophy cabinet might have looked a little empty compared to the year prior, since he didn't win the Cup or the Conn Smythe again, but posting almost a point-per-game performance and the best stats of your career at the time is enough to convince me that Tays had an improved season when he was the cover athlete. So welcome to the club, Captain Serious. So now that we've reached the end of the decade, what are the results for these 10 titles? Well, of the 11 different cover athletes between 2001 and 2010, 4 of them were seemingly affected by a cover athlete curse. Interestingly though, 4 different players produced improved seasons the year they were on the cover, while 3 players showed little difference either way. So if you were a cover athlete on an NHL game during the 2000s or early 2010s, you had an almost identical chance to produce any of the 3 different outcomes, so it was essentially a crapshoot. On the one hand, these results once again suggest that a cover athlete curse is highly unlikely, but at the same time, players hit with the curse made up a larger percentage of the outcomes during Part 2. Obviously, there were 4 less athletes on the cover this decade, so it was a smaller sample size, but it's still something to keep in mind, you know? These numbers also mean that 2/3 of the way into the series, of the 26 athletes to feature on the first 20 game covers, 8 different players suffered from a cover athlete curse, 12 different players had an improved season, while 6 players saw little difference either way. So cover athletes for the NHL series between 1991 and 2010 were still more likely to produce a better season than a cursed one, and were twice as likely to improve than produce little to no difference between the 2 years. But how will the most recent decade of the series impact the final results? Will an improved season still be more likely, or will a cover athlete curse finally take control? Tune in next time for the 3rd and final part of our investigation. And on that note, I'm going to end today's video. What do you guys think about the results from Part 2? Were you expecting them to follow the same trend as Part 1, or did this episode's results somewhat surprise you? Also, how do you think Part 3 is going to go? Let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Carl Fairbank, Chris Gadsby, Connor B, Drew Fawcett, Jordan Whitehead, Martin Tolness, Paul Mallia, Roman from London, Tom from Finland, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.